43 people were inside the restaurant when Johnson's hand closed around my throat. I know the exact number because the police report listed every single one. 31 reached for their phones. 6 looked down at their plates like the answer to everything wrong with this world was hiding somewhere between the soy glaze and the short ribs. 3 stood up but never moved, just stood there, standing, as if that counted for something. 2 headed for the door. Not one of them touched him. Except the man at table 12. He didn't reach for his phone, he didn't freeze. He set his chopsticks down without a sound, unbuttoned his left cuff, then his right, stood slowly like a man with all the time left in the world, removed his coat, folded it once precisely, the way you fold something you fully intend to pick back up, and placed it over the back of his chair. Then he walked toward my screaming with the calm of someone who has ended rooms like this before. I didn't know his name yet. I didn't know what he was. I didn't know that the same coat he'd just taken off to fight would be the one he draped over my shoulders when it was over, or that 8 months later it would be hanging on a hook inside a restaurant I built with my own hands. 4 hours before that man crossed a room full of witnesses who chose to do nothing, my biggest worry was whether my concealer would last the dinner rush. Before we go any further, if you're already hooked, hit that like button right now. Stories like Marie's deserve to be seen. Subscribe so you never miss one, and share this with someone who needs to believe that the right person will always show up at the right moment. Now let's get back to it, because you're not ready for what happens next. 4 hours earlier, I parked in the same spot I always park, second row, third space from the left, directly under the light that flickers but never dies. I chose it my first week because it's 11 steps from the back entrance and visible from the kitchen window. I know this because I counted. I count everything now, steps to the door. Seconds between the car lock chirp and the moment my hand touches the handle. The number of cars in the lot that weren't here yesterday, 2 new ones tonight, a black sedan, a silver truck with a dent in the tailgate. Neither one was his. I checked twice anyway. The employee bathroom at Belinda's has the kind of lighting that forgives nothing. Fluorescent, humming slightly off-key, the shade of white that makes everyone look like they've been crying. I stood in front of that mirror with a tube of Maybelline Instant Age Rewind in shade 120 and painted over what was left of the last time Johnson loved me. The bruising had faded to a brownish yellow by now, the body's version of a sunset, everything ugly softening into something you could almost pretend was never there. Almost, if the lighting cooperated, if no one looked too long. I blended with my ring finger the way the YouTube tutorial taught me. Small circles, light pressure, build in layers. The woman in the video had been covering a tattoo. I remember thinking how nice that must be to only be hiding something you chose. 3 layers tonight. The dinner rush runs 5 hours under halogen spots. I needed it to hold. I tied my apron in the back, double knot tight, the bow sitting right against my spine. I smoothed the front, checked the pockets for my pen, my pad, the lip balm I keep in the left side because the right side has a small hole I haven't told Belinda about. Routine, every piece in its place. When I'm behind that apron, I know exactly who I am. I'm the woman who remembers that table 4 hates cilantro and the couple at table 11 always wants their check before dessert. I'm the woman who once carried 9 plates without a tray because the busboy called in sick on a Saturday and Belinda said, "Girl, if you drop even 1 asterisk," and I didn't drop one. In this building I'm good at something. That has to be enough for now. Belinda was plating garnishes when I came through the kitchen. She looked up, tilted her head and smiled. "You look good tonight, Marie. The concealer's new," I said, which wasn't a thank you, and she knew it. I called Sandra at 6:47, 13 minutes before doors opened. Nicholas answered instead, breathless, like he'd sprinted from whatever 7-year-old emergency had consumed his evening. Mom, I drew our apartment." "Yeah, baby. It has a yellow door, and a window in the kitchen so you can see me playing outside." "And I drew a room for Aunt Sandra, but she says she's not living with us forever, so I made it a maybe room. I wrote maybe on it." I pressed the phone against my ear so hard the case bit into my cheekbone. I could hear Sandra in the background telling him to put on his pajamas. I could hear the TV. I could hear a life that was small and warm and mine. "I love the maybe room," I said. "Mom, the door is yellow because yellow means safe. I learned it." I hung up before he could hear what that did to me. Then I checked the parking lot one more time through the kitchen window. The silver truck was gone. The black sedan was still there. They came in at 7:22, 2 men. The shorter one entered first, eyes sweeping the room the way people check weather, quick and practical. The second man followed and the room changed temperature. I don't know how else to describe it. He wasn't loud. He wasn't large in the way that demands attention. He wore a dark coat that fit him like it had been cut by someone who understood his body was the least interesting thing about him. But when he walked through that dining room, the hostess dropped her voice mid-sentence. A waiter carrying a tray of banchan adjusted his path by 2 feet without realizing it. People moved for this man the way water moves around a stone, not because the stone asks but because the current already knows. Belinda sat them at table 12. Corner booth, back wall. I noticed he chose the seat facing both exits. I noticed because I would have chosen the same one. I approached with menus and water. Professional, steady, smile where the smile goes. Good evening, welcome to Belinda's. Can I start you with anything to drink? The shorter one, Richard, I'd learn later, ordered a height and the Galby J Jim without opening the menu. The man in the coat studied the drink list for exactly 3 seconds, then ordered the house macchioli. His voice was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with volume. Some people speak softly because they're unsure. He spoke softly because he'd learned a long time ago that he never needed to repeat himself. I was fine. I was doing fine. Then the man at table 6 slammed his palm on the tabletop. Some argument about a business deal. Nothing violent, nothing even angry really. Just a hand hitting wood the way hands do when people want to feel important. And my body made every decision before my brain had a single vote. The wine glass was on the floor before I registered I'd been holding it. Pinot Grigio and shattered crystal across the hardwood, a constellation of something ruined, and I was already on my knees saying sorry. I'm so sorry, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, 4 times. I counted later because I always count later. I was picking up the shards with my bare fingers. You're not supposed to do that, Belinda has told me twice. We have a dustpan for a reason when I felt him watching me. Not the way men usually watch. Not scanning, not assessing, not calculating what I was worth or what I owed. He was reading. The way you read something written in a language you wish you didn't speak. His eyes moved from my hands to my neck, the spot just below my left ear where 3 layers of Maybelline were earning their keep, and then to the way I was kneeling, turned slightly sideways, shoulder angled toward the nearest male body like a shield I didn't know I was carrying. He saw all of it, I knew because he didn't look away. Everyone else looks away when they see it. They look down or they look past you or they suddenly find something fascinating on their phone. He just stayed. No rush, he said, quiet as a closed door. Take your time. 4 words, 4 stupid, ordinary words that you could say to anyone about anything, a slow cashier, a lost tourist, a child tying their shoes. I had to bite the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. I refilled his water with 2 hands to keep them from shaking, and I walked back to the kitchen, and I stood behind the walk-in cooler door where no one could see me and pressed my palms flat against the cold steel until I could breathe again. Nobody had said take your time to me in 2 years. Johnson only ever said hurry up. The door opened at 8:41 and my body knew before my eyes did. I was refilling water at table 9, my back to the entrance. And every nerve ending I own fired at once, the way animals freeze before earthquakes, the way the air changes pressure before someone who has hurt you enters a room. I didn't need to turn around. My hands were already shaking. The water pitcher trembled against the glass and I set it down before anyone could notice. Then I turned. Johnson was wearing the charcoal suit. The one he bought for our anniversary dinner 3 years ago, the night he told me I was the most beautiful woman in the room, and then dislocated my shoulder in the parking garage because the valet looked at me too long. He had his hand on the small of Teresa's back, guiding her in like a gentleman, like a man who opens doors and pulls out chairs, and has never once wrapped his fingers around anything that begged him to stop. He was smiling. God, the smile. The one that made my mother say you found a good one, Marie. The one that made the judge hesitate before granting the restraining order because he seems so reasonable, ma'am. Are you sure this isn't something you two could work out? That smile is a loaded weapon, and I'm the only person in any room who knows where the safety is. Belinda was at the hostess stand. I watched her glance at the reservation book, then at Johnson, and I saw her back straighten, the way it does when she's about to become a problem for someone. I'm sorry, sir, this section is fully booked. I can seat you on the far side, Johnson Davis. I have a reservation, 8:45. He said it warmly, patiently, like a man who has never needed to raise his voice in public because he saves that for private. Table in Marie's section if she's working tonight. She's an old friend. Belinda looked at me across the dining room. I was already moving toward the kitchen. My legs knew the math, 14 steps to the swinging door, 6 more to the office. Lock it, breathe, call Sandra, tell her to check the windows. Belinda, I whispered when I reached her. Please, switch my section, I can take the bar tables. Anything. Belinda grabbed my arm gently the way she does. Go to the back, take a breath, I'm handling this. He's not sitting in your MARI. His voice hit every wall in that restaurant. Baby, is that you? Warm, delighted, the voice of a man seeing a long-lost friend at a party. Every single head in the dining room turned, 40-something faces swiveling toward the sound and then toward me, standing there mid-step, caught between the dining floor and the kitchen like an animal in a road. Teresa was watching me from his arm. She smiled, small, satisfied. The smile of a woman who found my workplace and handed it to him like a gift. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak. I was standing in the middle of my own restaurant, the one place I'm good, the one place I'm competent, the one place the apron means something, and I was 12 inches tall. At table 12, the man in the dark coat set his chopsticks down. Parallel. Precise. The way you set down the last thing you intend to do, gently. His companion shifted forward in the booth. One look from the man in the coat stopped him. Then he placed his right hand flat on the table, palm down, fingers spread, and held it there. I didn't know what that signal meant. 43 people would find out. He requested me by name. Belinda tried again, some excuse about staffing, about sections, but Johnson just smiled that smile and said, I'm sure Marie doesn't mind, do you, Marie? And every eye in the restaurant landed on me like a verdict. I picked up my pad. I walked to his table. I stood there with my pen ready and my spine made of something that used to be bone but was now mostly memory. Bring me the bulgogi, he said, not looking at the menu. You always overcooked mine at home. Let's see if these people taught you better. Teresa laughed. A bright, performative sound, the laugh of a woman who thinks she's winning something she doesn't yet understand is a war. I wrote it down. My handwriting was steady. I made sure of that. You lost weight, Johnson said, leaning back, scanning me the way you scan property you're considering repurchasing. Stress looks good on you, Marie. You should have tried it while we were together. I didn't respond. I asked Teresa what she'd like to drink. She'll have the rosé, Johnson answered for her. And I'll take a Johnny Walker neat. You remember how I take it. I turned to leave. His hand caught my wrist, not hard. That's what everyone would say later. It didn't look that hard. He held me the way you'd hold a dog's leash, firm enough to stop movement, gentle enough to deny intent. His thumb pressed into the soft tissue below my palm, right over the spot where old bruises live under the skin like sleeping things that never fully heal. You were always clumsy, he said, smiling up at me. Don't drop anything tonight, okay? I'd hate for you to embarrass yourself. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. He held my wrist for 3 seconds and looked me in the eyes the entire time, and I felt every month I'd spent rebuilding myself collapse like wet paper. Then he let go, smiled, picked up his water glass as if nothing had happened. The woman at table 8 leaned toward her husband. I heard her. You hear everything when your body is running on the kind of adrenaline that turns the world into a microphone. Should we say something? He shook his head. It's a domestic thing, don't get involved. A domestic thing, like domesticated, like tamed, like something that belongs inside a house and shouldn't have wandered out. Marcus, the busboy, was clearing plates 2 tables away. He saw the grab, I know because his hands stopped moving for half a second. Then he looked at the floor and kept stacking dishes. He's 19, he has a little sister. He looked at the floor. In the kitchen, Belinda was on the phone with 911. I'd find out later that the nearest available unit was 20 minutes away. 20 minutes. I once timed how long it takes Johnson to go from calm to hands around throat. It's 90 seconds, maybe less when he's been drinking. The math has never been in my favor. I set down his Johnny Walker without making eye contact and moved toward the kitchen, and I did not look at table 12 because I could not afford to see kindness right now. Kindness would break the seal. Kindness would make me cry, and if I cried, Johnson would know he'd already won. But I felt it, that same quiet gaze from the corner booth, steady, unblinking. Richard reached for his phone beneath the table. The man in the coat shook his head. Once, slow, not yet. The word yet is a door that only opens from one side, and every second it stayed closed, the room got smaller. I was carrying Teresa's rosé back to the table when Johnson stood up. He didn't stand the way normal people stand, shifting weight, pushing back a chair, the small, polite mechanics of a body making room. He rose like a wall being built between me and every exit I'd already mapped. I stopped. The rosé trembled in my hand. He stepped into the gap between tables 7 and 9, the narrow corridor I needed to pass through, and filled it completely. His voice dropped. Quiet now, the quiet I know, the quiet that means the performance is over and the real Johnson is home. You think you can leave me and just live? His lips barely moved. You think you get to have this, a job, friends, some little life where you pretend you're somebody? He leaned closer. I could smell the Johnny Walker. I could smell the cologne I used to buy him for Christmas because he told me it was the only thing I ever got right. You're nothing without me, Marie. You know that, I know that. Everybody in this room is about to know that. Please. My voice was a thing I didn't recognize. Not here. His hand closed around my throat the way a lock closes around a door. Fast, certain, total. He squeezed and my feet left the ground, not all the way, just enough that my toes scraped tile and my body understood it no longer belonged to gravity. It belonged to him. Again, still, always. The Rosé glass hit the floor somewhere far away. I heard it shatter the way you hear things underwater, muffled, irrelevant, part of a world that was leaving me behind. The restaurant went silent the way a church goes silent. The way the air goes silent before something irreversible. A woman gasped. Phones rose from tables and pockets and purses, 31 of them, I'd learn later, lifted like periscopes surfacing to watch a ship go down. A child at table 3 started crying. Belinda screamed my name from the kitchen doorway. A man at table 14 half stood, then sat back down. A couple near the window looked at each other and looked away. 43 people. And then the 43rd did something none of the others could. At table 12, the man in the dark coat pushed his chair back. No hurry, no panic. He stood the way weather changes inevitably without permission. He unbuttoned his left cuff, then his right. He reached behind his neck and drew the coat from his shoulders in one fluid motion like a matador, like a man shedding the last layer between himself and what he was built for. He folded it once, placed it on the back of his chair. Richard stood beside him. One look sat Richard back down. This is mine. He walked across that restaurant the way a river walks through a canyon, unhurried, inevitable, carving through everything in its path simply by moving forward. Past the raised phones, between the frozen tables, through 42 people who chose to watch. His hand found Johnson's wrist. Not a grab, something precise, mechanical, a compression that turned Johnson's grip into an open hand against its will. My feet touched the ground, my knees buckled. His other arm caught me before I hit the floor, lowered me down gently and then released me. Then he turned to Johnson. One strike, open palm, center of the chest. Johnson left his feet the way I had left mine, except nobody caught him. He crashed backward through table 9 in an explosion of porcelain and glass and everything fragile. The man stood over him and said one sentence in Korean. Quiet, final, the way you close a casket. Then he walked back to his chair, picked up the coat, carried it to where I sat trembling on the floor of my own restaurant, and draped it over my shoulders like he was covering something sacred. It was warm. It smelled like sandalwood and something I didn't have a word for yet. I pulled it closed around myself, and for the first time in 2 years I exhaled. Pause for a second because that moment, that's why we're here. If this story is hitting different, make sure you've liked this video. We've got chapters left and it only gets deeper from here. Subscribe if you're not already, new stories drop every week, and share this with somebody who needs to know what it looks like when one person in a room of 43 finally decides to move. The paramedics arrived before the police. Or maybe it was the other way around. Time had turned liquid, pooling in strange places, skipping forward without warning. I remember the cold of the stethoscope against my chest. I remember a penlight in my eyes. I remember a woman in a blue uniform asking me to swallow and the sound I made when I tried, a wet, broken click that didn't sound like it came from a person. Johnson was on the ground in handcuffs. He was calm now. Cooperative. Yes, officer. No, officer. This is a misunderstanding, officer. The voice he uses for authority figures, the one made of silk and reason. Teresa was already on her phone, calling someone, arranging something, doing the administrative work of making sure a man who strangles women in public is home by morning. Belinda sat next to me on the floor. She didn't say anything for a while. Just sat there, her hip against mine, her hand finding my hand and pressing something into it. I looked down. Nicholas's drawing. The apartment with the yellow door and the maybe room. She'd taken it from the corkboard in the office where I'd pinned it my first week. I held it so tight the crayon smudged against my palm. Yellow on skin, safe on skin. My son drew me a door and I was sitting on a restaurant floor with a stranger's coat on my shoulders and fingerprints developing on my throat like photographs of everything I'd failed to outrun. Across the dining room, the man from table 12 was giving his statement to a detective. I watched him speak, unhurried, precise, the same controlled stillness he'd carried all evening. He didn't gesture. He didn't repeat himself. The detective asked him something and he responded with the patient disinterest of a man who has sat across from law enforcement so many times it no longer qualifies as an event. At one point the detective said something into his radio and glanced back at the man with a different expression, not suspicion exactly but recognition. The way you look at something you've been briefed about but never expected to see in person. Before he left he walked to where I was sitting. Belinda stiffened beside me but didn't move. He reached into his coat, the one on my shoulders, and from the interior pocket produced a business card. White, heavy stock. No logo, no title, no company name, just 2 lines, Gary, and a phone number. He placed it in my hand the way he'd placed the coat, without asking whether I wanted it. Then he left. Richard followed. The black sedan in the parking lot, the one I'd clocked when I arrived, second row, the one that wasn't Johnson's, pulled out and disappeared. Belinda drove me to Sandra's apartment. I didn't ask the question until we were parked outside, the engine ticking in the quiet. Who is he? Belinda's hands stayed on the steering wheel. She stared straight ahead and said nothing, and her silence was the loudest thing I'd heard all night. Sandra answered the door in pajamas. She took one look at my throat and pulled me inside and held me in the hallway for 45 seconds without speaking. Then she saw the card. Her face changed. Marie. She said my name the way people say the word *careful. Do you know who that man is? She sat me at her kitchen table and showed me things on her phone. Articles with his name adjacent to words like *syndicate and organization and alleged. Photos of men in courtrooms who were connected to men who were connected to him. The kind of trail that never leads directly to a door but always circles the same building. He's not a good man, Sandra said. He's just a different kind of dangerous. I looked at the card. I looked at the coat folded in my lap, heavy, dark, still warm. 43 people watched a man try to kill me tonight. 42 of them chose to be safe. I kept the coat. I called the number on a Tuesday, 3 days after, not because I trusted him, not because Sandra hadn't spent 72 hours building a case for why I shouldn't. I called because the bruises on my throat had turned the color of plums, and every mirror in Sandra's apartment had become a crime scene photo, and I needed to sit across from the only person who had moved and ask him why. He chose the place. A small Korean diner on a side street in Koreatown, fluorescent lights, plastic menus, a woman behind the counter who didn't look up when we sat down. Not his territory. Not mine. Nowhere. He looked different outside of Belinda's. Smaller isn't the right word, he was the same size, the same stillness, but the restaurant had given him a frame. Here, under bad lighting, sitting across a formica table with banchan he wasn't touching, he just looked tired, not sleepy. Tired the way buildings get tired, tired in the foundation. I didn't ease into it, I didn't have the energy for comfortable. Why did you help me? He didn't answer. He picked up his phone, opened his photos and slid it across the table. A young woman. Mid-20s, hair pulled back, laughing at whoever was holding the camera with the kind of trust that means she knew them and felt safe. Her eyes had the same shape as his, the same dark steadiness, but hers were wide open in a way his would never be again. My sister, he said. Glory. Then he swiped to the next photo. A funeral, grey sky, Gary standing beside a casket in a black suit, his hands at his sides, his face, I can't describe his face in that photo. It wasn't grief. Grief moves. This was something that had stopped moving a long time ago and simply remained, like a stain that has become part of the surface. His coat was draped over the casket, the same coat, the one folded in a bag in Sandra's closet right now because I couldn't bring myself to hang it up and I couldn't bring myself to give it back. She told me once, he said. His voice was flat, not controlled, calcified, like something that had been at liquid once and had hardened into rock so slowly he didn't notice until it was permanent. 3 years her husband was hurting her. She told me once on the phone, I was in Seoul. Business, he said the word business the way you say the name of something that killed someone you love. I told her to be patient, I told her I'd handle it when I got back. He picked up his water glass, set it down without drinking. I got back too late. The diner hummed around us. The woman behind the counter called an order number in Korean. A man in a booth by the window turned a newspaper page. The world kept going the way it always does when someone tells you something that should stop it. I looked at the funeral photo again, the coat on the casket, the coat on my shoulders 3 nights ago, the same gesture, the same fabric, the same hands placing it over something he couldn't protect in time. He didn't save me, he saved Glory. I just happened to be standing where she should have been. I don't need you to trust me, Gary said. He was looking at the table, not at me. I need you to let me make sure you're still breathing tomorrow. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no, I said the only thing that was true. She had your eyes. His jaw moved once, just once, the smallest fracture in the bedrock. Then he picked up the menu and asked me if I'd eaten today, and when I said no, he ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted, and for the first time that didn't feel like control. It felt like someone who had already lost one woman to hunger she was too proud to name. Johnson made bail on a Thursday. His family's money moved faster than the justice system. It always does. That's the thing nobody warns you about. They don't tell you that a restraining order is just paper and bail is just math, and the whole machinery designed to protect you runs on the same fuel as everything else in this country. Whoever can afford to fill the tank first. I found out because Sandra called me at work. Her voice had that specific tightness, the one I've learned means she's already decided how scared to let me hear her be. He's out, Marie. I set down the tray I was carrying. I walked to the kitchen. I stood in the place behind the walk-in cooler that had become mine, my little rectangle of cold steel and silence, and I breathed. The next morning my phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. A photograph. Nicholas on the playground at Jefferson Elementary. His backpack, the blue one with the dinosaur patch Sandra sewed on because the zipper pull broke, hanging off one shoulder. He was mid-laugh, running toward the monkey bars, completely unaware that someone across the street was holding a camera and framing him like a target. The caption read, "Cute kid." The number belonged to Teresa. I knew it the way I knew everything about the machinery of Johnson's cruelty, by the fingerprints it left on ordinary things. That afternoon, Sandra found her car in the apartment lot with a word keyed into the driver's side door in letters deep enough to catch the light. Snitch. She sent me a photo of it without commentary. She didn't need to say anything. The message wasn't for her. It was for me. Everything is always for me. This is the part where I go back. I know this part. I've lived this part. The escalation, the siege, the slow arithmetic of terror where you calculate that returning to the man who hurts you is actually safer than staying away from him, because at least inside the fire you know where the walls are. I've done this math 3 times before. I always get the same answer. I always go back, except this time I had a different number in my phone. I didn't ask for help, I couldn't, that muscle doesn't work yet, maybe it never will. I just called, and when he answered I said 5 words. He found my son. Silence, not the empty kind, the kind that has weight and machinery behind it, the kind that sounds like someone rearranging the world inside their head. Then Gary said 2 words. He won't. He hung up. Within 48 hours, Johnson's family attorney, a man named Richard Hayes, and yes, the irony sat in my chest like a stone, filed a motion to withdraw representation. No explanation. Johnson's bail conditions were amended by a judge who, according to Sandra, had never amended bail conditions in 14 years on the bench. Teresa's phone number was disconnected. Not changed, disconnected, as if it had never existed. Then Johnson's mother called me. I almost didn't answer. But her voice, when I did, was something I'd never heard from that woman. She'd spent 8 years telling me I provoked her son. Now she sounded like someone standing in a room where the temperature had just changed permanently. "I'm sorry for my son, he'll be pleading guilty." A pause, a breath that shook. "Please tell your friend we understand." I didn't ask Gary what he did, I never asked. In court, Johnson pled guilty. 12 years, no parole eligibility for 8. The judge paused before accepting, visibly confused by the sudden absence of fight in a man who'd fought everything his entire life. Gary was not in the courtroom. Richard was, back row, arms crossed, watching. That was enough. 8 months later, my hands smell like doenjang paste and flour, and the lemon cleaner I use on the countertops every morning before anyone arrives. These are the smells of a life I built with my own hands. I want to say that clearly. I want to say it once so it sits in the air like something permanent. The restaurant is on a side street in Koreatown, a narrow storefront between a dry cleaner and a place that sells phone cases. The kitchen is small and imperfect. The hood vent rattles when the wind blows east. The back office is barely a closet, but the lease has my name on it, just mine, only mine, and every month when I write that rent check, I hold it for an extra second before I let it go. The funding came from 3 places. A small business loan Belinda co-signed without hesitation, sitting across from the bank officer with her reading glasses on and her jaw set like a woman who has never been told no and isn't starting today. My own savings scraped together 1 tip at a time over 11 months of doubles and weekends and shifts where my feet ached so badly, I soaked them in Sandra's bathtub at midnight. And Gary, he didn't offer, I asked. That was important to me, that I was the one who asked. He wrote a check and handed it to me and said nothing about it ever again. The restaurant is called Glory. He didn't name it. I did. Nicholas has a little desk in the back office where he does homework after school. He's 7 now and in love with multiplication, which he's terrible at, which is why every Tuesday at 4 o'clock a black sedan pulls up outside, and a man who has done things I will never ask about sits on a tiny chair next to my son and explains the sevens table in a mix of English and Korean that follows no grammatical rule any language has ever recognized. Nicholas calls him Ko Samchon, ain't Samchon uncle. Gary brings him banana milk every time, the same brand. Nicholas once asked him why always banana, and Gary said, very seriously, because strawberry is for people who have given up on life. And Nicholas laughed so hard the milk came out of his nose, and I stood in the doorway watching a man I will never fully understand make my son believe that the world has people in it worth trusting. Sandra has come around. Mostly. I will never trust that man, she told me last month, standing in my kitchen, watching through the window as Gary taught Nicholas to fold napkins into shapes that resembled either swans or, according to Nicholas, deformed turtles. But she stays for dinner now. She laughs at his jokes reluctantly, like it costs her something. She trusts what I trust, not the man, but the way my son's face changes when he hears the car. There is one unusual detail about my restaurant that no customer will ever understand. By the front door there is a single coat hook. Brass, simple, mounted at eye level, so it's the first thing I see every morning. Gary's coat hangs on it, the dark one, the one that smells like sandalwood and something I eventually found a word for certainty. I asked him for it. He gave it without asking why. He understood that some things stop belonging to the person who wore them and start belonging to the moment they were needed. Every morning before I unlock the door I stop. I press my palm flat against the fabric, not the way you touch something that belongs to a man. The way you touch a scar that healed correctly, with gratitude for the wound, because the wound is how the strength got in. Then I open the door, and I walk into my own room. She built her restaurant. She named it Glory. And every single morning she touches that coat, not as a woman holding onto a man, but as a woman who knows exactly how she became who she is. If this story moved you, please like this video. It truly helps more people find it. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that survival is just the beginning. And subscribe, because tomorrow we have another story waiting, and trust me, you don't want to miss it.